There is a very specific, visceral kind of dread that sets in when you download a PDF. It's 30-something pages long, costs a couple hundred Swiss francs if you bought it retail,
I know.
and its title is basically just a string of
Oh,
acronyms.
I know that feeling. It's the classic, I have to read this for work, but I really just want to lie down and weep.
Exactly, and I am virtually holding one of those right now. It is titled BSEN ISOIE 23894.2024 Information Technology Artificial Intelligence Guidance on Risk Management.
Hmm.
It's got the whole shebang, the European standard header, the copyright watermarks, that very serious sans serif font. It's the bureaucratic equivalent of a concrete wall.
And yet I have a feeling you're about to tell me and everyone listening that this concrete wall is one of the most exciting things happening in tech right now.
I am. I really am. Because this isn't just paperwork. This document it's like the collision of two tectonic plates.
Okay.
On one side, you have the chaotic, move fast and break things world of AI, large language models, neural networks, all the stuff that's rewriting society in real time.
And on the other side.
The immovable object, ISO risk management, the people who love spreadsheets and safety protocols and predictability.
So it's the unstoppable force meeting the seatbelt.
That is a perfect way to put it. So here's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to ignore the dry formatting. We're going to treat this as a masterclass.
Right.
We're acting as the instructors today. We're going to walk through this standard, practically clause by clause, from the very beginning all the way to the dense annexes at the back. Because if you want to know how the grown-ups, the governments, the massive banks, the healthcare systems, how they're planning to handle AI, this right here, this is the playbook.
And it's a playbook that really matters because it connects all those abstract fears we have. Will a robot take my job, or is the algorithm biased against me? It connects that to the very rigid, very disciplined world of ISO 31000.
Which is the gold standard for how businesses handle risk in general.
It is. This document essentially turns that existential dread into a checklist.
Ideally, yeah. It attempts to tame the beast by measuring it.
Yes.
So let's start at the foundation. Clauses 1 through 3. This is the scope section. Now, usually I admit I kind of skip the scope section in these things because it just says this document is about X. But you flag this one as critical. Who is this actually for? Because the immediate assumption is, well, I'm not OpenAI, I'm not Google, I didn't build the brain, so this isn't for me.
And that is the single most dangerous assumption a BAS leader can make right now. Clause 1 clears this up in the very first paragraph.
Okay.
The scope explicitly states it is for organizations that develop, produce, deploy,
Standard so far.
or use products and systems utilizing AI.
Or use. That's the trapdoor.
That is the trapdoor. Let's say you're a local credit union. You're not sitting there coding neural networks. You probably don't even have a data science team.
Right?
But you subscribe to a SaaS platform, a software as a service, that uses AI to screen loan applicants or detect fraud.
Which is almost every credit union at this point.
Exactly. You are a user. And according to this standard, you are on the hook for the risk management of that tool.
So if that tool discriminates against a certain zip code, or if it hallucinates and denies a loan to a perfectly solvent business, the credit union can't just shrug and point a finger at the vendor.
They can try, but if they claim to be following international standards, the answer is a hard no. It's like owning a car. You didn't build the engine, Ford or Toyota did, but if you drive 90 miles an hour through a school zone, or if you don't maintain the brakes, you were responsible for the risk you created with that machine.
Wow.
This standard applies to any organization, regardless of size or sector. It's basically saying, if you are bringing this technology into your house, you are responsible for whatever it breaks.
It changes the temperature in the room immediately. It shifts the burden from the creators to literally everyone.
It does.
Okay, so clause 2 and 3. Usually this is just a list of other books you have to go by, normative references. But there's a lineage here, isn't there? This document isn't just standing alone in the void.
No, and this is so important for the risk geeks out there, or really anyone trying to integrate this into a big company. Clause 2 points directly to ISO 31000.2018.
The Bible of General Risk Management.
The Bible, yes.
So what's the Cliff's Notes on 31,000 for people who don't have it, tattooed on their arm?
Well, ISO 31000 is the framework that says risk isn't just bad things happening. It defines risk as the effect of uncertainty on objectives.
Ah, okay.
And it gives you this generic machinery, Identify, analyze, evaluate, treat. What this AI standard 23894 does is say, do not invent a new process for AI. Do not create a separate AI safety team that sits in the basement and never talks to the chief risk officer.
Right.
Take the machinery you already use for financial risk or safety risk and install this AI lens on top of it.
So it's an expansion pack, not a whole new game.
It's an expansion pack, exactly.
Right.
It also pulls some definitions from another standard, ISOIEC 22989, which is about AI concepts, but the core DNA is 31,000. It legitimizes AI risk. It makes it a standard business practice, not some kind of sci-fi anomaly.
Okay, so from the foundation to the philosophy. Clause 4, principles of AI risk management. This is where we get into the why and the how. And the document has this massive table, Table 1. It lists standard risk principles on the left, and this is the real value add, it has a column for implications for the development and use of AI.
This table is the cheat sheet for the entire document. I mean it. If you only read one page, you should read Table 1. It bridges that gap between traditional business logic and the inherent weirdness of machine learning.
All right, let's pick apart the ones that really changed the game. The first one that jumped out at me was inclusive. Now, in normal business context, inclusive usually means, what, did we ask the department heads their opinion, or did we hold a town hall?
Right. In traditional risk, your stakeholders are usually your shareholders, your management team, maybe the regulators.
Yeah.
Pretty contained.
Yeah.
But look the AI implication in Table 1. It says risk management requires the appropriate involvement of stakeholders, and it specifically mentions internal and external groups.
And it warns about the complexity, right? The transparency problem.
Yes. It essentially says AI is opaque. It's a black box. And if you're going to be inclusive, you have to figure out how to explain this black box to people who have no idea how it works. And the stakeholders here, they aren't just the people who bought the software. It includes the people who are subjected to the software.
Your data subjects.
The data subjects, exactly.
Yeah.
If your AI is screening resumes, the applicant who got rejected is now a stakeholder. If your AI drives a car, the pedestrian on the sidewalk is a stakeholder.
Wow.
The standard warns that you need transparency reporting mechanisms. You can't just throw up your hands and say the computer said no. Inclusive means you are accountable to everyone the AI touches.
Which frankly sounds incredibly expensive. It implies a level of customer service or public relations that most software just doesn't require.
It's extremely resource intensive. It implies you need a communication strategy for people you don't even have a contract with. You have to be prepared to explain to a whole community why your algorithm decided to route delivery trucks through their neighborhood instead of another one.
That's a whole new world of accountability.
Okay, let's look at the next principle. Dynamic. This feels like the biggest technical differentiator. Most software is static, right? I buy Microsoft Word 2010, I install it. Unless I actively patch it, it's the same software in 2015. It doesn't wake up one morning and decide to change how it spell checks.
But AI does, or at least the system and the environment around it does. The standard notes that AI systems can be continuous learning systems, or they operate in environments that change rapidly.
The term drift comes up a lot in the industry. Can we unpack that a little? What does that mean?
Sure. There are really two main kinds of drift that make AI dynamic. First, there's what's called data drift. This is when the world changes. So, for example, imagine an AI trained to detect credit card fraud using data from 2019.
Then COVID hits. All of a sudden, everyone is buying groceries online, ordering strange things from Amazon, staying home. The fundamental spending patterns of the entire population change overnight. The model's code didn't change, but the world did. So the model starts flagging thousands of legitimate purchases as fraud. That's data drift.
And the second type.
That's model drift or concept drift. This is where the actual relationship between variables shifts. Or, and this is the really tricky one, in continuous learning systems, the model actually updates itself based on new data coming in.
And this is where it can get scary.
This is where it gets scary. Because if the model is learning from its users and the users start feeding it garbage or trying to trick it, the model degrades. It learns bad habits.
So the implication in Table 1 is that risk management can't be a one-and-done certificate you hang on the wall.
Correct. You can't. In construction, you inspect the bridge, you sign off, you're done. For AI, the standard says risk management must be a loop. It has to be iterative. You have to constantly monitor for emerging risks that didn't even exist when you first deployed the system.
So it's like buying a puppy versus buying a rock.
Chuckles. I like that. Yes.
The rock stays the same. The puppy grows. It learns bad habits. It might start biting the mailman. You have to watch the puppy.
You have to watch the puppy. That's a great analogy.
All right, let's talk about best available information. On the surface, this sounds like a platitude. Use good info. Well, obviously, who sets out to use bad info?
Of course. But in the world of AI, information equals data. And the word best is a very loaded term. The standard specifically warns that the historical data used to train the AI might be limited or biased or just. No longer true.
This is the provenance issue, right? Where did the data come from?
Yes, exactly. The text explicitly suggests that organizations must track the provenance of the data, where it came from, its history, its legal standing throughout the entire system's life.
So,
If you trained your model on a data set you just scraped from the internet, and half of that data turns out to be toxic or copyrighted or just plain wrong, your best available information just became a massive ticking liability.
it's like building a house on a foundation, but you have no idea if the concrete is made of cement or just sand.
And you don't know who sold you the sand, or if the sand was stolen from a protected beach. It's that deep.
That segues perfectly into human and cultural factors. This is fascinating to see in a technical ISO standard. It acknowledges that AI doesn't just exist in a vacuum.
It's arguably the most sociological part of the whole document.
Mm-hmm.
It forces engineers to stop thinking just about code and start thinking about societal patterns. The text specifically mentions impacts on things like privacy, fairness, and even freedom of expression.
Freedom of expression, that seems incredibly broad for a technical standard.
Well, think about content moderation AI on a social media platform.
Okay.
If you tweak the risk parameters to filter out hate speech, which sounds good, but you define hate speech too broadly, or your AI misinterprets cultural nuance, you are now directly impacting freedom of expression. That is a risk. The standard says you must consider the human and cultural landscape. If you deploy a Western-trained AI into an Eastern culture, or vice versa, the cultural mismatch could cause the AI to fail spectacularly or cause deep offense. It's not a coding error, it's a cultural error.
So if you're a tech bro in Silicon Valley, you are now required by the standard to think like a sociologist in Jakarta if that's where you're deploying your product.
Or at least hire one. The standard is telling you, in no uncertain terms, that your code is not culture neutral.
And finally, in this section, continual improvement. This obviously ties back to being dynamic, but it seems to emphasize learning from your mistakes.
It does. It explicitly mentions monitoring new research findings and performance successes or shortcomings. The AI field moves so incredibly fast. New vulnerabilities are discovered every single week.
Like prompt injection.
Prompt injection is a perfect example. That didn't exist as a major threat vector 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's a primary threat for any language model. If your risk management process from 2021 doesn't account for that, you're obsolete and vulnerable.
Okay, so that's the philosophy. Now we put on our hard hats. Clause 5, the framework. This is all about how an organization sets itself up to actually do this stuff. And it starts right at the top with the heavy hitters. Leadership and commitment.
This is what I call the boardroom clause. Sections 5.1 and 5.2 are specifically designed to prevent the CEO from using the "I'm not a technical person" excuse.
The classic defense. I just run the company. You need to talk to the nerds in the server room.
That defense is dead under ISO 23894. The standard requires that top management must ensure the organization's risk appetite and governance policies specifically address the responsible use of AI.
Let's define risk appetite. It sounds like something you have before dinner.
Chuckles.
Yeah.
It's a measure of how much danger you're willing to swallow in the pursuit of profit. A startup, for instance, might have a very high risk appetite. Move fast, who cares if a few things break? A nuclear power plant better have a near-zero risk appetite. This standard demands that leadership explicitly defines this for AI. Are we okay with our chatbot hallucinating and giving bad advice 5% of the time if it saves us $10 million in call center costs? The board has to write that down.
And if they write yes and it blows up in their face, they are on the record as having accepted that risk.
Exactly. It forces a conscious, documented decision rather than just accidental negligence. It makes the risks visible to the people who are actually signing the checks.
Yeah, within Clause 5, we get to Section 5.4, Design. This includes something called the Context Assessment, and there are two huge tables here, Table 2 and Table 3. Let's start with Table 2, the external context. This is like looking out the window. What's the weather like outside?
This is your radar. It lists things you'd expect, like legal regulatory factors.
Yeah.
But you have to look closely. It doesn't just say laws. It mentions guidelines on ethical use issued by government or civil society.
Wait, hold on. So even if it's not a law, just a guideline from some nonprofit or a think tank, you have to consider it.
You have to consider it as a source of risk. Why? Because if you ignore a widely accepted ethical guideline, you risk reputational damage. And look, Table 2 explicitly lists stakeholders' perceptions as a factor. It even mentions opaqueness, the lack of transparency or bias. If the public perceives your AI as creepy or unfair, even if it's perfectly legal, that is a formal risk source you have to manage.
That is powerful. It basically monetizes creepiness, it
Yeah.
says. If people think your tech is weird or invasive, that is a quantifiable business risk you have to log and address.
It does. And look at the contractual section. It brings up the complexity of networks.
We talked about this with the credit union example.
Right. If you are using an API from a big tech company and they suddenly change their terms of service or their model starts to degrade in quality, that is a massive external risk to you. You are completely tethered to their stability. You're renting intelligence. You're not earning it.
Then we flip the mirror for Table 3, the internal context. This is about what's going on inside the house.
And this is where it forces some uncomfortable soul-searching conversations. It asks about your capabilities. Do we actually have the talent on staff to manage this? Do we understand the explainability of our own systems?
That's a real humble pie moment, isn't it? Do we actually know what we're doing?
Many organizations, if they're honest, don't. They buy a tool, they deploy it, and they just hope for the best. Table 3 says that a lack of internal knowledge is, in itself, a high-risk factor, and it focuses heavily on data. Data is listed as the lifeblood of AI. It asks about data quality, data flow, and any resource constraints. If you don't have the internal infrastructure to properly clean, label, and verify your data, you are building your AI house on a swamp.
Okay, so Clause 4 was the theory. Clause 5 was the organizational setup. Now we enter the engine room. Clause 6, the risk management process. This is the step-by-step how-to.
This is the iterative loop. It mirrors ISO 31000 very closely, but it gets really granular on the AI-specific parts.
It starts with communication, 6.2, and again it warns that the set of stakeholders for AI is larger than initially foreseen.
It's warning you about your blind spots. It talks about unconsidered external stakeholders. This is basically code for the people you didn't even think you were going to piss off.
Like the artists whose work was scraped without their permission to train an image generator.
That is the perfect example. They weren't customers, they weren't employees, they had no relationship with the company. But they became a massive risk source, legal and reputational, because they were unconsidered stakeholders.
And they organized, they sued, they created a huge PR nightmare.
They did. This standard is telling you to look harder for those groups before you launch, not after.
Okay, moving to 6.3. Scope, context, and criteria, specifically 6.3.4, risk criteria. This is all about measurement. How do we even measure risk in AI? I mean, if I'm building a bridge, I can measure wind load, I can calculate the failure point of steel. But AI is probabilistic. It's just guessing.
That is the core difficulty, and Table 4 addresses it head-on. It highlights uncertainty. AI outcomes are rarely 100% deterministic. You don't get a yes or no, you get a confidence score. I am 85% sure this image contains a cat.
But it might be a dog.
It might be a dog or a toaster.
Yeah.
Your risk criteria have to be able to handle that fuzzy logic. You have to define, okay, we accept an 85% confidence for classifying cat photos, but we need 99.999% confidence for classifying tumors in a medical scan.
It also mentions time-related factors.
Right, because of the speed of evolution we talked about.
Sure.
A risk assessment from just 6 months ago is basically ancient history in the AI world. And it also highlights complexity specifically, risks that are emergent.
Emergent is a spooky word. It sounds like ghosts in the machine.
It kind of is. It means behaviors that only appear when the system interacts with the complex, messy, real world. You can't find them in a sterile lab environment.
For example?
You might test a chatbot for 1,000 hours and it's perfectly polite and helpful. You release it on a Twitter and within an hour, the chaotic interaction with millions of users causes it to emerge as a toxic hate speech generator. That behavior wasn't in the original code. It emerged from the interaction.
So how do we even begin to catch that? That brings us to 6.4, risk assessment. This is the deep dive within the deep dive. And step 1 is identification, 6.4.2. What are we trying to identify here?
Well, first, your assets. What are you trying to protect? And it goes way beyond just servers and source code. It lists intangible assets, things like reputation, trust, and get this, societal beliefs.
Wait, societal beliefs is listed as a corporate asset? That sounds incredibly abstract.
It is abstract, but it's vital. If your AI floods the zone with disinformation and erodes public trust in democracy or public health, you have damaged a societal asset. The standard recognizes that organizations that wield this kind of power act as stewards of these assets.
Yeah.
You're borrowing the public trust to operate your AI. If you break it, you have destroyed an asset you are entrusted with.
Wow. Okay, so after assets, we identify risk sources.
Right. The usual suspects, data, hardware, software, and notably, the standard calls out automation level as a risk source itself.
We'll talk about that more in the annexes, but it's this idea that too much automation can actually be the source of the problem.
Exactly. Then you identify consequences, 6.4.2.6. I have this part highlighted in neon yellow in my copy. It moves so far beyond just, we lost money. It explicitly lists threats to health or safety, image reputation, and customer litigations.
So physical safety and brand safety are on the same ledger. There's no distinction.
Which is absolutely vital for things like autonomous vehicles or medical AI. If a self-driving car crashes, that is a safety risk and a reputation risk simultaneously, and they have to be treated with the same gravity.
Okay, so once we've identified all the bad things that can happen, we have to analyze them. 6.4.3, risk analysis. And this is where the document makes a really important three-way distinction on impact.
Yes, and this is a profound shift from traditional corporate risk. Usually you only look at the impact on the organization. Did we lose profit? Did we get fined by a regulator?
Standard stuff.
But 23894 adds two more categories, impact on individuals and impact on society.
Break that down for us. Impact on individuals.
This is about fundamental rights, privacy, bias. Let's take our bank loan example again. If your AI unfairly denies a mortgage to a single mother because of some hidden bias in the data, the bank might not lose any money. In fact, it might even make more money by being overly risk-averse. The impact on the organization is positive or neutral.
Right.
But the impact on the individual is catastrophic. It affects her housing, her ability to generate wealth, her entire life. The standard demands that you weigh that impact as if it were your own company's loss.
And the third category, society.
That's the macro level, the big picture. What about the environmental impact? Training these massive models consumes unbelievable amounts of energy and water. Or what about political stability? If your algorithm discovers that it can increase user engagement by radicalizing a population, the company makes more money.
So impact on the organization is positive.
But the country becomes unstable and polarized. The impact on society is devastatingly negative.
This feels incredibly difficult to calculate. How do I put a dollar value on radicalizing a population?
You can't put a precise number on it. And that's why the next step, assessing likelihood, is so hard here. The standard openly admits there's high uncertainty. You're dealing with what they call black swan events, things that are very rare, very low probability, but have near infinite impact if they happen.
So you've done the analysis, you realize, okay, this chatbot we're building might destroy our reputation and radicalize teenagers. Now what? 6.4.4, risk evaluation.
This is the go-no-go decision point. You take your analysis and you compare it against that risk appetite that the board defined way back in Clause 5. If the risk you've analyzed is higher than the appetite you've set, you cannot proceed. You have to treat it.
Which brings us to 6.5, risk treatment. The fixes, what are our options? The standard lists 5 classic moves.
Move 1 is simple. Avoid the risk. Just don't do it. Don't use AI for that task. Use a human. Or use a simple if-then script.
The most underused option in tech, I think. Sometimes a spreadsheet is just better than a neural network.
Absolutely. Move 2. Change the likelihood. This means making the bad thing less likely to happen. Improve your training data. Clean it better. Test it more rigorously.
Move 3. Change the consequences. This is your safety net. This is where you put a human in the loop. So if the AI flags a transaction as fraud, don't automatically freeze the customer's account. Have a human review it first. The AI can still be wrong, but the consequence is now just a few minutes of a human's wasted time, not a furious customer who can't buy groceries. Okay. Move 4. Share the risk.
This is about insurance. Or it's about having very detailed contracts with your vendors where they explicitly accept some of the liability.
And finally, move 5. Retain the risk.
You just accept it. You look at it and say, we know this might fail 1% of the time. We have budgeted for the potential lawsuits, and we are proceeding with full knowledge. It's an informed decision.
But, and this is so key, you have to record that decision.
6.7 recording? Absolutely. If you don't write it down, it didn't happen. This is for the auditors. This is for the lawyers. If something goes terribly wrong, you need to be able to produce a paper trail that shows traceability. You have to be able to say, here is the data we used, here is our risk assessment, and here is the record of the meeting where we decided to retain this risk. If you can't produce that, you're just negligent.
And you can't just file it away and forget about it. 6.6 monitoring and review.
It has to be a continuous assessment. You must constantly monitor for trustworthiness. If your model starts drifting, if its performance degrades, you have to be able to catch it. You need dashboards, alerts, and regular scheduled audits.
Okay, that wraps up the main body of the standard. But as we promised at the start, we are not done. The annexes in this document are practically half the value. They're like the detailed cheat sheets. Let's walk through Annex A objectives. This feels like the what good looks like list.
That's a great way to put it. Think of Annex A as the goals. If the risk management process is the defense, these are the treasures that we're trying to defend.
Okay, first up, 8.2 accountability.
This one is simple but profound. The organization must answer for the AI's decisions. You cannot blame the algorithm. The black box made me do it is not an acceptable defense in the world of ISO. You need a clear chain of command for who owns the AI's mistakes.
Next, 8.3 AI expertise.
This is a real sleeper hit, this one. It says you need to ensure the people who are building and using the system actually understand it. You can't give the keys to a Ferrari to a toddler.
Right.
If your customer service staff doesn't understand the limitations of the AI tool they're using, if they treat it like a perfect oracle rather than a statistical guessing machine, that is a failure to meet Objective 8.3.
Then there's 8.4 data quality.
Validated, relevant, current, and diverse. It specifically calls out the need to avoid bias by having sufficiently diverse data. If you train a medical AI only on data from one demographic group, it will inevitably fail for everyone else. That's not just a bias issue. The standard defines it as a data quality issue.
And that leads right into 8.6 fairness.
Avoiding unfair outcomes. This links directly back to the societal impact we discussed. It requires you to actively check if your objective function, the thing the AI is trying to maximize, inadvertently harms a specific group of people.
And then 8.8 privacy.
The standard says AI acts as a privacy risk multiplier. And it notes that AI has this spooky ability to infer sensitive personal data from non-sensitive data.
What exactly does that mean?
Inference. Okay, so let's say I have a data set with your zip code, a list of groceries you buy, and the movies you watch on a streaming service. None of that on its own is considered sensitive personal data.
Right.
But a powerful AI might analyze patterns across millions of people and infer with a very high degree of accuracy that you have a specific medical condition or a particular political affiliation. It literally creates private data out of public data. And that is a massive risk. You might be violating privacy laws without ever having collected private data directly.
That's terrifying. And finally, A12 transparency and explainability. Are these two words for the same thing?
No, and it's a critical distinction. Transparency is about the process. It's saying, we used this specific data set, we trained it with this algorithm, we tested it this way, here are the logs. It's about being open about the ingredients.
Okay.
Explainability is about a specific decision. It's the answer to the question, why was my loan application denied? And the answer has to be something like, because your debt-to-income ratio was X, which is above our threshold of Y. The standard demands you have both. You need to be able to communicate how the system works in general and why it made a specific choice in a particular case.
Which brings us to the flip side, Annex B risk sources. This is the what can go wrong list. And honestly, it reads like a sci-fi horror plot outline.
It is a catalog of nightmares for any C-suite executive, yes.
Let's start with B.2 complexity.
This is the idea that the real world is infinitely more complex than any training data. An autonomous car might encounter a weather pattern like a specific type of freezing rain that creates a unique glare on the road that it was never, ever trained for. That unpredictable environment is a fundamental risk source. You can't train for everything.
B3, lack of transparency, the black box problem.
If your deep learning models are opaque, you can't inspect their logic.
Right.
And if you can't see the logic, you can't reliably predict how it will fail. You're flying blind. You are trusting a system you don't fully understand to make critical, sometimes life or death decisions.
Then B.4 level of automation. We touched on this, the handover problem.
Yes, this is classic aviation psychology being applied to AI. If a system is 99% automated, the human operator gets bored. They get complacent, they zone out, they check their phone. When that AI suddenly fails at 70 miles per hour, can the human mentally load the context and take over safely in under 2 seconds? Usually the answer is no. The standard flags high levels of automation as a risk source because it degrades human readiness and skill.
Okay, then B.5 machine learning specific risks. One of these is data sourcing.
The legal risks. Did you steal the internet to build your model? If your groundbreaking AI is built on a foundation of copyrighted books or artists' images without their permission, you are sitting on a legal landmine that could blow up your entire company.
And another one is continuous learning.
This is the risk that the AI unlearns its safety rules. You deploy a customer service chatbot that is programmed to be polite and helpful, but then users swear at it and try to trick it for a month. It learns from them, and suddenly it's not polite anymore. It has been corrupted by its environment after deployment.
Finally, B.7 system lifecycle issues. I want to focus on reuse.
This is a huge one. This is about taking an AI that was designed for one context and just jamming it into another one without thinking. Let's say you have an AI model that's great at recognizing faces in casual holiday photos on social media.
Okay, works great.
Then you turn around and sell that exact same model to a police force to identify suspects in grainy, low-light surveillance footage.
It's a total mismatch.
A total mismatch. The lighting is different, the camera angles are different, the stakes are infinitely higher. The standard warns that this mismatch between the original design context and the new use case is a major, often overlooked source of risk. You cannot just cut and paste intelligence.
And the last one here, decommissioning. What happens when you turn the AI off?
It's the zombie data problem. If the AI learned from user data, can you actually delete what it learned? It's not like deleting a file from a hard drive. The knowledge is distributed across billions of weights in the neural network. To truly protect privacy, you might have to completely destroy the model you spent millions of dollars building.
And finally, we have Annex C lifecycle mapping.
This is the bow that ties it all together. It's a big table, table C21, and it just maps the risk management process we talked about in Clause 6 against the typical AI system lifecycle.
So inception, design, deployment.
Right, and it shows that risk management starts at inception. Before you write a single line of code, the first risk management question is AI even the right tool for this job?
Sometimes the best AI risk management is just using a spreadsheet.
Exactly. Then in design, you're assessing data collection risks. In operation, which is the longest phase, it's all about continuous validation and monitoring for drift. And even at retirement, you're evaluating the risks of replacing the system or ending the service. It emphasizes that this is a cradle-to-grave responsibility.
So we have walked the entire path. From the scope to the principles to the deep, dense annexes, it is a massive document. But if we zoom all the way out, what is the headline here? What's the one thing people should take away?
The headline is that AI is no longer a science project. It is industrial machinery. And ISO 23894 is the operator's manual. It tells us very clearly that you cannot just hire an AI risk guy and stick him in the basement. This has to be woven into the very fabric of the organization's governance from the boardroom down.
And it requires a fundamental shift in thinking, away from static software and towards managing these dynamic learning systems.
It completely changes the definition of success. Success isn't just the model has 99% accuracy. Success is now the model is accurate, fair, transparent, explainable, and we can prove it.
Okay, so here's where I want to leave the listener. We talked about human and cultural factors and societal impact. If organizations actually follow this standard, I mean, really follow it, not just tick a bunch of boxes for an auditor, they aren't just protecting their own bottom line. They are effectively acting as guardians of societal values. They become the firewall between algorithmic harm and the public.
That is the aspirational goal, yes.
Yeah.
That is what this standard is aiming for.
But, and I have to ask this, especially looking at Annex B and the risks of opacity and complexity, is it actually possible? Can you fully conform to this standard with today's black box technology? If we can't fully explain how a model like ChatGPT works, can we ever truly meet the transparency and explainability requirements of ISO 23894? Or is this standard an aspirational goal, a wish list that the technology itself just hasn't caught up to yet?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? The standard allows for treating risks by formally accepting them. But are we as a society accepting too much opacity? It challenges every organization to look at their own AI policy and ask a really hard question. Are we genuinely managing this risk, or are we just closing our eyes and hoping nothing goes horribly wrong?
Something to chew on the next time you ask a chatbot for a recipe. Check your risk appetite, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.